My wife didn't wait until the funeral was over. She walked up beside my father-in-law's coffin, in front of both families, and dropped divorce papers right next to the flowers I had just placed there. Then she looked at me and said, "I'm rich now. You're useless. Sign it and get out of my life." 7 years of working 2 jobs, paying medical bills, and caring for her father like he was my own, erased in front of everyone. But 24 hours later, that same woman was calling me in a panic. Because the $700 million she thought was hers had been protected from people exactly like her. I used to think loyalty would speak for itself. That if you stayed through the hospital nights, paid the bills, and held a family together quietly, someone would remember. But that day beside Harlan's coffin, I learned silence doesn't protect your worth. Sometimes it only lets the wrong people price it for you. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Because if you've ever been thrown away by someone you carried, this story is for you. My name is Quillen Drake, and I was the youngest son in my family long before I became the unwanted husband in Jody's. That may sound like a small thing, being the youngest, but in my family it meant one rule followed me everywhere. Quillen will handle it. If my brother needed help moving, I was called. If my sister needed money floated until payday, I was asked. If mom wanted peace at the table, I was expected to swallow whatever was said and smile. So when Harlan Voss got sick, I did what I had always done. I showed up. For 7 years, I drove my father-in-law to appointments, picked up prescriptions, argued with insurance offices, and worked late contracts after my regular shift to cover what Medicare and supplemental plans did not touch. Jody called it being helpful. Harlan called it love. His funeral was held in an old church in Albuquerque, the kind with dark wood pews and stained glass windows that made even silence feel formal. People filled the aisles, talking softly about how much Harlan had given to the South Valley, how many jobs he had saved, how many families he had helped. Jody stood near the front in a fitted black dress, dry-eyed, checking her phone every few minutes. Beside her was Brody Kessler, a polished real estate man with expensive shoes and a smile that never reached his eyes. I noticed him whispering to her twice. She nodded both times. I was placing white lilies near Harlan's coffin when I saw his old silver pocket watch resting beside a framed photo. A man behind me murmured, "Harlan carried that watch for 30 years. I remembered Harlan turning it over in his hand one night after chemo and saying, "Money comes and goes, Quillen. Time is what you never get back." Before I could steady myself, Jody stepped beside the coffin. She did not touch her father's photo. She did not say a prayer. She pulled a stack of papers from her purse and dropped them on the coffin stand, right beside the folded funeral program. The sound cut through the room. I looked down. "Divorce papers." "Sign them," she said. A few people gasped. My mother looked at the floor. My brother Tiber shifted in his seat but said nothing. My sister Lenora pressed her lips together like my humiliation was an inconvenience. "Jody," I said quietly. "Not here." Her eyes hardened. "I'm rich now, Quillen. You're useless. Sign it and get out of my life." The room went still. That was the part that hurt most. Not the papers, not even the insult. It was the silence from everyone who had watched me carry hospital bags, bring meals, sit through treatments, and sleep in chairs beside Harlan's bed. Brody stood behind her, calm as a man watching a deal close. That told me enough. This had not been grief. This had been planned. Jody pushed a pen toward me. "Don't make a scene. You've already taken enough from this family." I picked up the pen. My hand was steady, though something inside me had gone quiet. I signed. Then I set the pen down and looked once at Harlan's pocket watch. I did not know why, but I felt like he was still warning me. Outside, the desert wind hit my face as I walked to my truck. I sat behind the wheel, closed the door, and let the church noise fade behind me. My phone buzzed. A message from Celeste Wren, Harlan's attorney. "Don't leave town. Read nothing yet." I stared at those 6 words until the screen dimmed. And that was when I understood. The funeral was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. I did not drive home after the funeral. There was no home left to drive to, not in any real sense. I checked into a small motel off Central Avenue, the kind of place with thin towels, a humming ice machine, and a front desk clerk who knew better than to ask questions. I set my suit jacket over the back of a chair, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at Celeste's message until my phone went dark. Don't leave town. Read nothing yet. That was not the kind of message a lawyer sent after a normal funeral. I slept maybe 2 hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jody dropping those divorce papers beside Harlan's coffin. I heard her voice again, clean and sharp. You're useless. That word did not hurt because it was loud. It hurt because she said it like she had been waiting years to finally say it. Around 6, I made bad motel coffee and opened the folder of bills I had kept in my truck. Harlan's oxygen equipment, his medication copays, the home care nurse, the treatment's insurance approved, then delayed, then denied. I had sold my old F-150, the one my father left me, to cover a balance Jody said was temporary. Temporary became 7 years. I worked my regular job managing network systems for a medical supply company, then took weekend delivery routes from a warehouse near the interstate. I missed birthdays. I postponed dental work. I stopped buying anything I could not justify twice. Jody never asked, "Can we afford this?" She asked, "How much longer is this going to cost?" At 8:30, I drove to Celeste Wren's office in Nob Hill. Albuquerque was already bright, the sun bouncing off stucco walls and car windshields. I remember thinking it was strange that the city looked so normal when my life had been split open the day before. Celeste met me at the door herself. She was in her late 50s, calm in the way only people who have read too many wills and watched too many families turn on each other can be calm. She didn't offer small talk. She led me into her office, closed the blinds, and locked the door. "Quillen," she said, "Harlan gave me instructions about you months ago." "About me?" She nodded. "About you, about Jody, and about the estate." I leaned forward. "Then tell me what's going on." "Not yet." I almost laughed, but nothing in her face invited it. "If I tell you everything now," she said, "Jody will say you were coached. Brody will say we conspired. Your own family may not understand." Harlan knew that. The mention of Brody's name tightened something in me. Celeste opened a desk drawer and removed a sealed envelope. My name was written across it in Harlan's careful handwriting. "For Quillen. Open only when the storm begins." I held it, but did not tear it open. "Is the storm here?" I asked. Celeste's expression softened. "After yesterday, I'd say it's arrived." Before leaving, I asked one question. "Did Jody inherit $700 million?" Celeste looked at me for a long second. She inherited a misunderstanding. That answer followed me all the way to Corrales. Harlan's place sat beyond a row of cottonwoods, quiet and sun-washed, with the Sandia Mountains standing in the distance like they had seen this kind of foolishness before. I still had a key, because Harlan had insisted on it. "If the generator goes," he once told me, "I trust you to know which switch not to touch." Inside his office, the air smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. His desk was clear except for a pair of reading glasses and a legal pad with his handwriting on the top sheet. I did not search like a thief. I opened only the folders stacked in plain view. Community Development Initiative, Employment Recovery Trust, Regional Apprenticeship Program. Those were not names. Rich men gave to spending accounts. Those were obligations. Payroll guarantees, construction loans, job training funds, promises made to people who would never attend a fancy reading of a will. I pulled up public trust filings on my phone. The totals were enormous, close to what Jody had bragged about. But the money was not sitting. It was pledged, moving, securing projects, backing loans, keeping workers employed. Suddenly, Jody's confidence did not look powerful. It looked dangerous. As the afternoon faded, I checked our joint account from my phone. That was when I saw the first missing transfer. Then another. Then another. Small enough to hide if a man was exhausted. Large enough to matter if he finally looked. The destination name made my jaw set. Kessler Property Group, Brody. I sat in Harlan's chair and let the silence settle around me. Yesterday, I had been humiliated in front of 2 families. Today, I was beginning to understand it had not been a sudden cruelty. It had been preparation. By the time I returned to the motel, the sky had turned purple over the city. I sat at the little desk by the window and opened Harlan's envelope. There was only one page. If you are reading this, the storm has already started. People reveal who they are when they believe nobody can stop them. Do not defend me. Do not defend yourself. Let the truth arrive on its own. I read it twice. Then again, slower. Harlan had known. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Near 10, my phone buzzed again. Celeste. The estate reading has been moved up. Tomorrow morning. Attendance mandatory. Bring the letter. I looked out at the motel parking lot, at the tired neon sign, and the empty spaces between cars. For the first time since Jody threw those papers at me, I stopped thinking about the divorce. Something larger was already moving, and whatever Harlan had built, it was about to teach all of us what $700 million really meant. By 8:30, I was parked outside Celeste Wren's office in Nob Hill, holding Harlan's letter in my jacket pocket like it weighed 10 pounds. I had expected a small meeting. Maybe Jody, Celeste, a secretary, and me sitting around a polished table while legal words slowly ruined what was left of a family. That was not what I walked into. The conference room was already prepared. Long table, bottled water, name cards, thick binders stacked in front of every seat. Two men I did not recognize sat near the far end with trust folders open. A woman from the foundation board stood by the window, speaking quietly into her phone. This was not a simple will reading. This looked like a board meeting. Celeste saw my face and said, "Take a seat, Quillen. Let the room fill before you draw conclusions." That was easy advice to give and hard advice to follow. Jody arrived 15 minutes later wearing a cream suit that looked too bright for the day after her father's funeral. Brody Kessler came in behind her with a leather portfolio under one arm. He did not look like a grieving family friend. He looked like a man about to close escrow. Jody did not sit beside me. She took the chair across the table. "Let's get this done," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some of us have decisions to make." Celeste looked over her glasses. "Yes, Jody. That is exactly why we are here." The first few pages were ordinary. Personal effects. A few vehicles, Harlan's tools, some land parcels, a charitable bequest to a veteran's dental clinic. Jody barely listened. Her fingers tapped the table, impatient and sharp. Then Celeste reached the trust. The room changed. Even Brody leaned forward. Celeste turned one page, then another. Her voice stayed even. "The total valuation connected to the Voss Regional Development Trust is approximately $700 million. Jody's mouth curved slightly. Then Celeste continued, "However, these assets are not liquid inheritance funds." Jody's smile disappeared. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," Celeste said, "the money exists, but not for personal withdrawal." Brody opened his portfolio. "That doesn't sound right." Celeste did not look at him. "Mr. Kessler, this is not your estate." A quiet breath moved through the room. Celeste explained it plainly. Harlan had pledged the trust as collateral for housing projects, job programs, apprenticeship centers, and emergency payroll protections across New Mexico. The funds secured obligations. They backed real workers, real families, real contracts. The money was not sitting in an account waiting for Jody. It was already doing what Harlan built it to do. Jody stared at the documents. "So I can't touch it?" Gideon Strick from the bank folded his hands. "No, ma'am. Not for personal use. You're telling me my father left $700 million and I get nothing?" Celeste slid another page forward. "I'm telling you your father did not confuse inheritance with spending money." Jody's face tightened. "Don't talk down to me." "I'm reading his words," Celeste said. Then came the clause that changed the temperature in the room. Harlan had created a family stipend. Not a fortune, but enough to live on with dignity. There was one condition. The recipient had to maintain employment, education, trade training, or documented community service, averaging 20 hours per week. Quarterly review, no exceptions. Jody blinked like the words had offended her. "I don't need job training," she said. "No one said you did," Celeste replied. "The document says you need contribution." Brody's pen stopped moving. Jody leaned back. "This is ridiculous. Dad would never make me ask permission for my own money." Celeste finally looked straight at her. "Jody, did you read the part your father underlined?" The room went still. Celeste lifted a page from the binder and read Harlan's statement. "Wealth without responsibility weakens a family. I will not leave money to anyone who treats work as an insult." No one spoke. I had heard Harlan say versions of that sentence in his kitchen, in his pickup, at the ranch office, while receipts and contractor notes covered the desk. Back then, I thought he was giving advice. Now I understood he had been building a test. Jody pushed her chair back. "I need a break." Brody followed her into the hallway. Through the glass wall, I saw him talking fast, one hand slicing the air. Jody shook her head, defensive at first, then frightened. He was not comforting her. He was asking about money. Money already promised. Money already spent. When they came back in, Celeste asked me for the letter. I placed Harlan's envelope on the table. She entered it into the estate record without opening it. "This will matter sooner than some of you expect." Jody turned toward me. "What did he give you?" I met her eyes. A warning. For the first time since she dropped those papers by the coffin, she had no quick answer. As people stood to leave, I thought the worst shock of the day had already landed. Then I saw Jody step into the parking lot, phone pressed tight to her ear, telling someone, "It's locked, not gone. I just need more time." That was when I realized she had not only misunderstood the money, she had already gambled on it. I stayed near Celeste's window after the meeting ended, not because I wanted to spy on Jody, but because my legs had not decided what to do yet. Across the parking lot, she stood beside Brody's black SUV with her phone pressed tight to her ear. Her voice carried just enough through the glass. "It's temporary," she said. "The transfer is delayed." Then she listened. Her shoulders lifted, tense and stiff. "No, the money is there. I just need a few days." Brody stood beside her, no longer polished, no longer smiling. He kept looking around like a man afraid someone had followed him. That was when I knew disappointment wasn't the problem. Debt was. Before I left, Celeste called me back into her office. She closed the door, sat across from me, and asked one simple question. "Quillen, have you checked your joint accounts lately?" I looked at her. "Not closely." She nodded, as if that was exactly what she expected. "Then do it before you talk to Jody again." She did not accuse my wife of anything. She did not need to. After 7 years of handling hospital statements, insurance appeals, and payment plans, I had learned that careful people often say the most by saying the least. I drove back to the motel without turning on the radio. Albuquerque traffic rolled past me, ordinary and loud, while my mind kept circling the same thought. Joint accounts. At the motel, I set my laptop on the little desk by the window and logged in. The first page looked normal enough. Groceries, gas, utilities. A pharmacy charge I remembered paying for Harlan's medication. Then I went back further. 3 months, 6 months, a year. The pattern appeared slowly, which somehow made it worse. 500 here, 1,200 there, 2,500 marked as consulting deposit. A transfer to Kessler Property Group. Another to Kessler Development Services. Then one to an investment account I had never authorized. By the time I added the amounts, I sat back and stared. More than $85,000, not stolen in one dramatic sweep. Taken carefully, quietly, in pieces small enough to hide behind exhaustion. And I knew exactly when those withdrawals happened. While I was working weekend delivery routes, while I was calling billing departments and asking for extensions, while Jody was telling me I worried too much. My phone rang before I could finish downloading the statements. "Jody." I let it ring twice, then answered. "What did you do?" she snapped. I looked at the screen full of transfers. "That's an interesting question. Don't play games with me, Quillen. My father's money is locked. Brody says there are commitments that can't wait." "Commitments? That's none of your business. If marital funds were used, it became my business." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. Then she came back sharper. "You always did this, acting like the responsible one, making me feel like a child because you had a paycheck and a spreadsheet. I made spreadsheets because bills are real." "No," she said. "You made them because you liked feeling needed." That one landed clean. I could have raised my voice. I wanted to. Instead, I clicked download on the bank statements and saved everything to a folder. "Jody, did you move money from our accounts to Brody's companies?" "You should have warned me," she said. That answer told me everything. "You mean before you threw divorce papers at me beside your father's coffin? You knew something was wrong with the will. I knew your father better than you did. That's not the same thing." She went quiet again. I heard Brody in the background, saying something low and impatient. Then Jody said, "You don't get to ruin my life and pretend you're the victim." I closed my eyes for 1 second, then opened them. "I didn't build this, Jody. I'm just finally looking at it." She hung up. I sat there for a while, listening to the motel air conditioner rattle against the wall. Then I printed every statement the front desk would allow me to print. The clerk gave me a look when the pages kept coming, but I paid in cash and said nothing. Near sunset, I drove out to Harlan's place in Corrales. I needed to see whether the name Kessler appeared anywhere in his files. The house was quiet. In his office, I opened the cabinets with the same care I used when Harlan was alive. Community housing, trade training, veteran apprenticeships, payroll guarantees. Every folder had people attached to it. Not heirs, not luxury homes, people. In the back of one drawer, I found a memo addressed to the foundation board, dated 4 months before Harlan died. One sentence was underlined. "Some people mistake stewardship for ownership." I sat in his chair and read that line 3 times. Harlan had not been confused. He had seen this coming. At 11:47 that night, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I did not know. A photo loaded slowly. It was a contract. Brody Kessler's signature was on one line, Jody Voss Drake's on the other. Amount committed, $250,000. Funding source, anticipated inheritance distribution. Under the image, someone had typed, "You don't know how deep this goes." I stared at the contract until the room seemed too quiet. This was no longer just greed. This was turning into fraud. I did not sleep after that message. The contract stayed open on my phone until the battery dropped into the red. 2 signatures, 1 promise. $250,000 tied to money Jody had never received. By sunrise, I had moved from shock into work mode. That is one thing years of medical bills taught me. Panic wastes time. Paper tells the truth. I used the motel Wi-Fi to search public business records. Brody Kessler had more companies than I expected. Kessler Property Group, Kessler Development Services, Mesa Ridge Holdings. Same mailing address, same registered agent, different names, different promises. The project tied to Jody was a luxury development outside Corrales. Renderings showed glass walls, desert views, private gates, and a clubhouse for people who probably said community while keeping everyone else out. Every document depended on one phrase, anticipated inheritance liquidity. I leaned back in the chair. They had not just imagined a rich future, they had sold pieces of it. Around noon, Celeste called and asked me to stop by the foundation office in South Valley. She said there were files Harlan wanted reviewed before the full board meeting. I drove over with my eyes gritty and my thoughts sharper than they had any right to be. The foundation building was plain, practical, and busy. No marble, no chandeliers. Just classrooms, offices, and a workshop where young people were learning trades that could actually feed families. In the hallway, I noticed a young man carrying 2 boxes while 3 older staff members talked over him. "Put those in storage, Owen," one woman said without looking at him. He nodded and kept moving. No complaint, no attitude, just quiet obedience. I knew that posture. Shoulders slightly folded in, face calm, effort invisible. It looked too familiar. I helped him with one of the boxes. "You don't have to," he said. "I know," I told him. "That's why I'm doing it." He gave me a small smile. People usually notice when something goes wrong. Not when you keep it from going wrong. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. After I left the foundation, I drove back to Harlan's house. Celeste had cleared me to organize his project records, and I wanted to see whether Brody's companies appeared in any older files. The afternoon light sat low across the office floor. I opened cabinets slowly, stacking folders by year, then by project. Inside a lower drawer, behind several binders, I found 3 small digital recorders in a plastic bag. Most contained Harlan's notes, contractor reminders, medication questions, a grocery list he dictated after treatment because his hands were too tired to write. Then I played one dated 6 months earlier. Jody's voice came through first. "Dad, you have to stop acting like this trust belongs to strangers." Harlan sounded weaker than I remembered, but his mind was clear. It belongs to the promises I made. Brody spoke next, smooth and careful. Mr. Voss, nobody is saying abandon your causes. We're talking about unlocking value. Jody deserves flexibility. She deserves responsibility, Harlan said. Jody laughed once, bitterly. You always cared more about workers than your own daughter. I built that trust to protect workers, Harlan said. Not bankroll speculation. A long pause followed. Then Jody said, low and cold, that's not your decision anymore. I stopped the recording. The office seemed smaller after that. This had not started at the funeral. It had not started with grief or confusion or one ugly moment beside a coffin. Jody had been pushing for control while her father was still alive, still sick, still fighting for breath. And Brody had been there, guiding, encouraging, waiting. I copied the file to a drive and placed the recorder back exactly where I found it, not because I was afraid to use it, because I had learned enough from Harlan to know evidence had to be handled cleanly. That evening, back at the motel, I sat on the bed without turning on the lights. Part of me wanted to leave, pack what little I had, drive west, let Jody and Brody explain their own disaster. Peace sounded tempting when every new truth cut deeper than the last. But then I thought of Owen carrying those boxes. I thought of the families whose paychecks depended on the trust Jody wanted to drain. I thought of Harlan's letter. People reveal who they are when they believe nobody can stop them. I opened my laptop again. This time I did not look for reasons to understand Jody. I made folders, bank statements, contracts, public filings, audio record, timeline. Not for revenge, not to humiliate her, for clarity. Because silence had been my habit for too long. And maybe my silence had given people room to mistake kindness for permission. At 11:18, another message arrived from an unknown number. Brody knows you're looking. No signature, no explanation, just that. I stared at the screen, then saved a screenshot. The recording was important, but Brody's next move was already coming. I barely managed to put my phone down after reviewing the latest messages. Every detail I had uncovered was rattling in my mind like loose boards in an old barn. The contract, the recording, the misappropriated funds, it all felt like a trap snapping shut around me. And yet, as the sun climbed higher over Bozeman that morning, I realized Brody was already moving his pieces. By mid-morning, whispers began. At the foundation office, I overheard half-phrases from donors and board members. I thought Quillen had been very involved, someone said. Voice low, careful. Another added, he seemed to know the trust details unusually well. Just enough to seed doubt. No direct accusations, but suspicion traveled faster than any open lie. I kept my head down, pretending to work while watching Owen handle the busy workshop. 20 years old, carrying boxes, quiet, efficient. He reminded me of myself in my 20s, silent, overlooked. Always making sure things ran smoothly while others took the credit. Watching him, I realized my own years of patience had been a double-edged sword. My silence had protected others, yes, but it had also allowed deception to thrive. By noon, Jody began spreading her version of events. Not on social media yet, not in public spaces. She whispered strategically to relatives, her voice smooth, measured. I trusted him. He knew what was coming. He never warned me. He watched me fail. And just like that, her carefully curated story started gaining traction. Emotionally satisfying lies travel faster than the complicated truths of accounting and trust structures. Within hours, some people genuinely began questioning whether I had manipulated Harlan's trust decisions in the final months. I felt my stomach twist. After years of unpaid work for the foundation, after months of balancing ranch projects and hospital bills, this made me feel naked and exposed, and yet there was no one directly confronting me. That was the cruelest kind of assault, public doubt, without the comfort of a face to argue with. By mid-afternoon, board members started asking questions, their voices polite, but their eyes wary. The funding, the partnerships, the reputation of the programs Harlan spent decades building, they cared about all of it. And now, they were unsure if the man who had carried it all, the one who had quietly managed Harlan's affairs, was trustworthy. The silence of the office weighed on me. It reminded me of Owen, moving boxes while no one noticed him. moving mountains of work without acknowledgement. And suddenly, I understood why I had felt invisible my entire life. I was that person always there, always useful, yet always expendable in the eyes of those who judged from the outside. By evening, the pressure escalated. Brody stopped hiding. I began noticing subtle digs everywhere I went. At the coffee shop downtown, someone mentioned my insider knowledge of the trust. At the post office, another casual remark. Quillen seemed awfully prepared. No one accused directly, but the seed of doubt was planted. Brody's strategy was brilliant in its cruelty. Let the lies do the work, let the public fill in the blanks, and make me the villain without ever saying it outright. I returned to Harlan's ranch that night, the sky dark and wind sharp against my face. The workshop felt like a sanctuary. I picked up the old silver pocket watch Harlan had always carried, turning it over in my hand. Time shows people who they really are. The words echoed, louder than any rumor, more truthful than any accusation. For the first time, I stopped asking whether people would believe me. I stopped hoping for fairness. I stopped waiting for someone else to fix the chaos around me. Instead, I began to think strategically. I didn't let the anger consume me. It would only cloud judgment. I cataloged the rumors, the anonymous messages, Brody's likely moves. Patience had its limits, but strategy could outlast anyone's deceit. This was my awakening. No longer reacting, only preparing. Near midnight, a final warning arrived. An email from an unknown address. No greeting, no context. Only a sentence. Walk away before the next story comes out. Attached, a blurred photo of me at Harlan's ranch office from earlier that day. Someone had been watching. Someone who knew my every move. The realization sent a chill down my spine. This was no longer gossip. This was intimidation. And if they were willing to go this far already, the next steps could be far worse. I set the phone aside and exhaled slowly, letting the cold Montana night fill the room. My mind raced, but for the first time, I felt a kernel of control. The threats, the lies, the manipulation, they were predictable. I could see the weaknesses. I could see where Brody had underestimated me. The first wave of doubt had hit. The second wave of fear was here. But I was ready to ride it out, not because I trusted anyone else, not because I expected fairness, but because the truth, however slow, would find its way. And this time, I would be ready to direct it. Audience interaction point. If telling the truth could cost you your reputation, would you still tell it? Emotional reflection line. Being hated for something you didn't do hurts. Being doubted by people you helped hurts even more. Link to next chapter. The threat should have scared me into backing down. Instead, it forced me to notice the one weakness Brody never thought I'd find. Continuing the content of the next chapter, the moment I stopped defending myself, I finally saw the mistake that would bring his entire plan crashing down. The warning should have made me quit. Instead, it did something better. It made me stop acting like a man being chased. By the next morning, I was no longer asking why Brody and Jody were hurting me. I was asking why they were rushing. People who feel secure do not send threats from blocked accounts. People who believe they are winning do not hide behind rumors. That told me there was a clock somewhere. I just had to find it. I spent the morning at Harlan's office, sorting through the archived foundation files with a legal pad beside me. Not everything important looks dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a cabinet full of dusty folders and handwritten notes from an old man who paid attention when everyone else was talking. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a black notebook labeled simply, People. That was Harlan. He tracked character the way other men tracked stock prices. Most pages held short observations. Everett Crow, steady under pressure. Celeste Wren, trusts paper more than promises. Good. Jody. Confuses comfort with love. Still hope if she learns work. Then I found Brody's name, Brody Kessler. Always rushes toward money before understanding responsibility. Under that, Harlan had written one more line. Never underestimate what greed reveals under pressure. I sat back and let that settle. Harlan had seen Brody long before I did. I drove to Celeste's office after lunch with the notebook and the files I had copied. She read Harlan's notes without speaking. Then she looked at the stack of invoices I brought from the foundation transition folders. Where did you find these? In the development files. They looked routine until I checked the dates. That was the thing about Brody's mistake. He had not made one large, obvious move. He had made many small, convenient ones. Consulting invoices submitted before approvals. Planning fees billed for projects that never left review. References to land options that did not match county records. Celeste pulled her laptop closer. We need public filings. So we went through them the old-fashioned way. County records, business registrations, contractor notices, bank references. Nothing flashy, nothing emotional. Just dates, signatures, names, and amounts. The truth came into focus slowly, like a picture clearing through dusty glass. Brody had used the estate chaos as cover. While everyone talked about Jody's supposed inheritance, he had been positioning his companies around foundation-adjacent projects. Not stealing from the trust directly. He was too careful for that. But he was trying to profit from confusion, urgency, and Jody's belief that she would soon control everything. He did not need the truth. He needed everybody distracted. By late afternoon, Celeste made 3 copies of the timeline. One for her legal file, one for the board, one for me. Quillen, she said, do not confront him alone. I wasn't planning to. She gave me a look that said she knew I had considered it. I mean it, she said. Men like Brody don't panic loudly. They improvise. On my way out, I stopped at the foundation workshop. Owen was still there, sweeping sawdust into a neat pile after everyone else had left. The overhead lights hummed. A half-built cabinet sat on one table, clamped square and careful. You're always the last one here, I said. He shrugged. Somebody has to make sure it's ready for tomorrow. I almost smiled. Careful. That kind of thinking gets expensive. He looked at me for a second. Is that what happened to you? A younger man would have asked with judgment. Owen asked with recognition. I leaned against the workbench. For a long time, I thought being useful would make people value me. Did it? No, I said. It made some people expect more. He nodded like he already knew. Driving back to Harlan's place, I realized why that conversation bothered me. Owen was not weak. Neither was I. We had simply been trained to believe that peace was worth any cost, even when we were the ones paying it. That ended now. At the ranch, I opened Harlan's silver pocket watch and watched the hands move. Steady, patient, unbothered. That was when Brody's weakness finally became clear. It was not greed. It was certainty. He was certain I would stay quiet. Certain I would protect Jody from embarrassment. Certain I would absorb the insult, take the blame, and walk away like I had done beside the coffin. He had built his plan around the wrong version of me. I called Celeste and told her to secure everything. The audio file, the bank statements, the public records, the invoice timeline, Harlan's notebook. No exaggeration, no dramatic language, just verified facts. The stronger the evidence, I told her, the less I have to explain myself. That, she said, is the first smart thing anyone has said all week. That evening, Everett Crow sent notice of the South Valley Foundation Gala scheduled for Saturday. Donors, board members, local reporters, business partners, the whole room. Then a second message came in from Owen. Brody RSVP'd. Jody, too. I looked at the pocket watch lying open on Harlan's desk. The confrontation was not going to happen in court. It was going to happen in public, right where they tried to bury my name. For the first time since the funeral, I felt no need to defend myself to people determined to misunderstand me. I had something better than anger. I had timing. By Saturday evening, I already knew the evidence was solid. What I did not know was how far Brody would go to make sure nobody heard it. The South Valley Foundation courtyard was strung with warm lights, the kind Harlan always said made a simple place feel like a promise. Families moved between tables. Students stood beside small displays from the apprenticeship program. Donors shook hands near the coffee station, smiling the way people do when they want their generosity noticed but not questioned. From the outside, it looked like a celebration. To me, it felt like walking into a room full of dry brush with somebody already holding a match. Jody was near the stage in a navy dress, composed enough to fool people who had not seen her panic in Celeste's office. Brody stood beside 2 board members, laughing lightly. one hand in his pocket, like he owned the evening. Before the program started, I found Jody near the memorial garden. "Some things are coming out tonight," I said. "You still have time to step away from Brody and tell the truth." Her face tightened. "There it is, the noble act. I'm not threatening you." "No, Quillen. You're punishing me because I finally stopped needing you." That sentence might have hurt me once. That night, it only confirmed what I already knew. She was not defending facts. She was defending the story she had told herself. I walked back towards Celeste, but before I reached her, the lights above the stage dimmed. Brody moved first. The screen behind the podium lit up with financial records. My name appeared in highlighted lines, clipped from emails and foundation access logs. Bank transfers flashed beside dates, with no context. A few people turned toward me immediately. Brody stepped to the microphone. "I hate to do this at an event meant to honor Harlan," he said, sounding wounded in that polished salesman way. "But donors deserve transparency." That word, transparency, nearly made me laugh. He suggested I had used my access to steer information, influence Harlan, and position myself inside the foundation after the estate froze. He never said I stole. He never needed to. He knew suspicion was enough. Then he showed an email, a message that looked like it came from me. "Once Harlan passes, the foundation belongs to people smart enough to run it." The courtyard went silent. Jody looked at me, and for a brief second I saw triumph return to her eyes. I had planned for invoices, public filings, the recording. I had not planned for a forged email projected in front of donors, board members, and local reporters. If I shouted, I would look guilty. If I stayed quiet, the lie would settle. That was the trap. Celeste moved toward me, but I raised one hand slightly, not to stop her, to slow the moment down. I thought of Owen, standing beside the student display, face pale. I thought of Harlan's workers, the families, the people who had trusted that this place would keep going. This was no longer about my marriage. It had not been for a while. I stepped onto the stage. "I won't argue with a projector," I said, "but I will ask the board to look at the original file metadata." Brody's smile faltered. Celeste walked forward with a tablet and a printed report. Calm, precise, unemotional. "The email shown on this screen was created from an edited PDF at 3:14 this afternoon," she said. "It was not sent from Mr. Drake's account. The originating device is linked to a consulting firm previously retained by Mr. Kessler." The silence changed. It sharpened. I handed Everett Crow the folder we had prepared. "Everything in there is public record. Consulting invoices submitted before project approval. Land option references that don't match county filings. Payments routed through companies connected to Brody's firms." Brody pointed at me. "This is desperate. He's covering himself." "No," I said. "I'm done covering other people." Celeste played the audio from Harlan's recorder. His weak but clear voice filled the courtyard. "I built that trust to protect workers, not bankroll speculation." Then Jody's voice followed. "That's not your decision anymore." Jody lowered her head. Brody stopped talking. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then Celeste opened Harlan's notebook and placed his silver pocket watch on the podium beside it. The watch caught the stage light, small and plain, and worth more to me than any check. I read Harlan's line aloud. "Wealth reveals character. Responsibility builds it." That was the moment the room understood. The $700 million had never been Jody's prize. It had never been Brody's opportunity. It was Harlan's last act of stewardship, and they had mistaken it for something they could swallow. Everett stood and announced that all Kessler-related partnerships were suspended pending review. Donors, who had been whispering minutes before, began asking Celeste for copies of the findings. A reporter stepped back, recording quietly now. Jody looked at the students, the board, the memorial photo of her father. Then she looked at me, not with anger this time, but with the first honest grief I had seen in her since the funeral. I did not feel victorious. I felt clean. Outside the courtyard, under the New Mexico night, I slipped Harlan's watch back into my jacket and breathed like a man who had finally stopped carrying a lie. The fight was over. Healing was not. 6 months after the gala, the foundation campus no longer felt like a place Harlan had left behind. It felt alive. The new training wing in South Valley opened on a warm spring morning, with desert light pouring through the glass doors and kids walking in carrying notebooks, tool bags, and nervous hope. The welding shop smelled like clean metal. The computer lab hummed softly. In the courtyard, families stood under shade canopies, talking about classes, childcare, bus routes, and second chances. That was Harlan's real inheritance. Not the 700 million Jody thought she could grab. Not the ranch. Not the documents. People. A mother who could keep her job because her son had after-school tutoring. A veteran learning HVAC repair. A 19-year-old getting certified instead of drifting between hourly jobs. The money was still doing what Harlan meant it to do. It was moving through lives, not sitting in someone's private account. Brody's world did not collapse in a dramatic way. That is not how real consequences usually work. His contracts dried up. Investors stopped returning calls. The review board found enough irregularities to end his partnerships and stain his name in every room he used to walk into with confidence. No one had to shout. No one had to chase him. Trust left quietly, and once it did, he had nothing solid to stand on. Jody stayed. Not as an heir. Not as anyone special. She started at the foundation as a program assistant, filing intake forms, answering phones, helping families who did not care whose daughter she was. At first, I could see pride fighting her every hour. She hated being corrected, hated asking questions, hated wearing a name badge that did not impress anybody. But real work has a way of sanding down performance. One afternoon, I saw her kneeling beside an elderly man who had brought in the wrong paperwork for a housing repair grant. Instead of brushing him off, she sat with him and went through each page slowly. "No rush," she told him. "We'll figure it out." I stood across the hall and watched. For a moment, I saw something of Harlan in her. Not enough to erase what she had done. Not enough to rebuild a marriage. But enough to believe she had finally met the part of herself her father had been trying to reach. A week later, she asked to speak with me outside near the memorial garden. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for the money she had taken from our joint accounts during Harlan's illness. Not all at once. Not easy. But every dollar accounted for. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. That surprised me more than the check. Then she handed me a letter. It was not full of excuses. She did not blame grief, Brody, pressure, or confusion. She wrote that she had confused being loved with being rescued. She wrote that I had been kinder to her father than she had. She wrote that calling me useless beside his coffin was the cruelest thing she had ever done. I folded the letter carefully. "I can accept the apology," I said, "but I can't go back." She nodded. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she did not argue. That was how I knew something in her had changed. Not because she cried, because she did not try to make her pain my responsibility. Owen became the first recipient of the Harlan Voss Skilled Trades Scholarship. During the ceremony, he thanked me from the podium, awkward and red-faced, saying I had believed in him when he was just the guy moving boxes. I wanted to tell him I knew exactly how that felt. Instead, I shook his hand and said, "Don't shrink yourself to make other people comfortable." He smiled like he understood. Near sunset, after the crowd thinned, I drove to Harlan's ranch one last time before the property became part of the foundation's education program. His office had been cleaned out, but the room still held him somehow. Cedar, dust, old sunlight. I carried his silver pocket watch in my palm. The same watch from the funeral. The same watch I held when I nearly gave up. The same watch I placed on the podium when the truth finally found its voice. A display case had been prepared for the Foundation Museum room. I set the watch inside and closed the glass gently. It no longer belonged to me. It belonged to the lesson. Before leaving, I opened Harlan's final letter. Celeste had kept it sealed until the dedication was complete. His handwriting was thinner than before. "Quillen, if you are reading this, then you finally stopped carrying everyone else's judgment." I had to sit down after that line. The people who deserve your love will never require you to earn your value first. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods. For a long while, I did not move. Something inside me loosened, not all at once, but enough. Later that evening, I stood in the foundation courtyard as children chased each other between folding chairs and adults talked about new classes starting Monday. Nobody introduced me as Jody's ex-husband. Nobody called me the overlooked youngest son. Nobody treated me like the man who almost lost everything. They just called me Quillen, and that was enough. The story began beside a coffin, with divorce papers and a woman who thought money made her powerful. It ended in a courtyard full of people Harlan had never stopped fighting for. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance is not money, property, or status. Sometimes it is the courage to stop asking the wrong people to tell you what you are worth.